All right, good evening. Welcome to another edition of Above Trauma Tuesdays. Hopefully, you guys are in a positive mental and emotional space. And if not, it is my goal to get you there by the end of this episode. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the difference between being in love and being in trauma. And as you guys may know, whenever I bring a celebrity's name into the episode, it's for a reason. It's for the reason of using their public relationship as a case study so that we can also make some determinations as to why we may end up in similar situations, why we may be finding ourselves in certain types of cycles, and oh, continuing to stress the fact that upbringing and the childhood environment plays a major role in our relationships and how we navigate them, how we choose partners, what types of partners we choose, what types of partners we're attracted to. And so hopefully, uh, by the end of this, anybody, who does want to chime in as far as any personal relationship situations. You don't have to name any names, but I would definitely love to hear some examples as far as trauma bonding, or maybe even the question of whether, somebody in the past or somebody maybe current is a relationship worth moving forward with, or if there's certain red flags that maybe undetectable at this time. So I want to acknowledge everybody in the room. Shiva, I see you. Sincerely Black Love, I appreciate you both coming through. And without further ado, let's get into where this topic came from, right? So I was watching the Joe Budden podcast. Hey, tell you what's up. I was watching the Joe Budden podcast, and I saw they had Tyrese on there, so I definitely wanted to see what he had to say. And obviously this isn't his first time talking about it, but he's currently going through a divorce from his ex-wife Samantha Lee. And from the things that he has spoken on, he's referenced her being narcissistic. He's referenced her being a quote sociopath. He's referenced a lot of manipulation, and but in a nutshell, he's referenced a major switch up, right? So he noted that in the beginning, she was real humble, wasn't about money, you know, um, he felt really in love with her. She was a very sweet person. And then he said all of a sudden she switched over. And he also said that her friends said that, it was a major difference. Her behaviors had switched up majorly, and she's the one that prompted the divorce. And he can't really articulate why she did that, really. Like, it seemed like after the child, now she wants a divorce. But and even now she came out on a podcast and said she regretted it. And some of the things were interesting, so I want y'all to key in on this, right? Some of the things that Tyrese said about himself and about their marriage were very interesting. So one thing that he said was that he with his exes, he cheated on like all of his exes at one point or another. But with this particular one, his soon to be ex-wife, he had stopped cheating entirely. Like he going into that and dating her and going into the marriage, he hasn't cheated once, not at all, with her. And he made a commitment to be faithful with this time around, for the first time, right? And that was very interesting. And we see kind of how that turned out. Like you know, it's valiant that he would want to move in that direction, and it's a great thing. However, it didn't change the outcome, right? And we're going to talk about why things ended up that the way that they did. But I'm sure it was a insult to injury to know that he got to a point where he was gonna stop cheating for good, and this is the one person that he didn't make that make that mistake with, and it still ended up in disaster. He still ended up with his heart broken, and still ended up relatively connected to somebody that he didn't really know well, right? And so the next thing that made my antennas go up was that he said he's in another relationship now. So he said that this breakup was very traumatizing. He went to a lot of dark places, but he also mentioned that he's dating somebody now. He has a girlfriend now that he's really into, and they're building a connection and things like that. And for me, right, with a background in mental health, uh, being a trauma recovery coach, but having a lot of doing a lot of work with clients as far as individuals, families, couples, that that hit me, man, because the the alarm went off in the sense that why it's really fast to be jumping into a whole nother relationship this soon after the last one, especially since it was really devastating emotionally, right? But I understand it, because the temptation after you come out of a tough breakup, not only romantic relationships, but when you come out of any sort of traumatic situation, whether you lose a loved one, whether there's some sort of tragic situation that you go through that creates deep emotional pain, the temptation to rush into a romantic relationship reaches a pinnacle around this time, because you're in the most need of comfort, you're in the most need of someone to care for you, you're in the most need of love, especially if you lost somebody. Like if somebody passed away, that is a love source that is now inaccessible. So your heart wants to grab and connect on to another person with whom you can receive love, right? As soon as possible. And so it makes logical sense. It makes emotional sense. That's how we're wired. The problem is, and I've been, when it comes to relationships, this is something that is I'm very passionate about, and I've done quite a bit of analysis on. The problem is when you jump from one tragic relationship ending, whether it's something as major as divorce, especially if there's children involved, because the stakes get higher, the emotional responses get higher, and the emotional toll gets higher in a situation like that. And so when you come out of that, you are in pieces, and your radar, when it comes to detecting red flags, when it comes to vetting potential mates, when it comes to seeing in a 360 panoramic view when you're dating, your radar is broken. Your radar is offline. You are not able to properly detect what you need to detect before you're putting your heart in somebody else's hands, right? And even if you could see the red flags, your heart is so broken and in need that you would probably ignore them anyway and just move forward, right? And the problem comes in when you choose based on brokenness instead of wholeness, and you don't give your chance to adequately heal. You then you are the people who are most attractive to you at that low point are those who resonate at a similar point, meaning they likely have just come out of something rough too, or they're the exact person to keep you in that rough, dark space. Because if we're being honest, it all goes back to the childhood environment. We choose what's familiar. It's human nature to choose what's familiar, whether it's devastating, whether it always ends in hell and always ends in trauma and tragedy. We do it again and again and again. It almost becomes like a compulsion. And I've helped a lot of people work through toxic dating cycles because that's exactly what it is. And a lot of times we look at the ex, right? So it's we often we when we talk, you hear people talking about their exes online. It's always bad, right? And it's always like F my ex, or my ex was this, or my ex was that, right? The interesting part is that for that person to be that bad, you chose them. They resonated with you at some point, whether it was in the past, in the middle. They resonated enough with you for you to choose them and keep them and maintain a relationship with them over a period of time, right? Because no relationships happen at gunpoint. Nobody comes up to you in the Whole Foods or at the club and says, we gonna get married tonight, or I'm killing everybody in your family. It never happens like that, which means that you had to give access for that person and continue to do so on a daily basis, right? Now, this is something that we've all been here. So this is not coming from a judgmental place at all. We've all been in this situation before. Um, but we have to realize the resonance is always active. And the problem is when you come out of something rough, you're almost choosing your next torture by choosing too fast or choosing in the middle of a trauma response, right? Now you heard me talk familiarity before, so let's talk about Tyrese's past, and I'm gonna make sense out of some of the stuff that he said in the interview when he was talking about how he cheated on all his past exes and wanted to make a different decision this time, right? So let's focus on the cheating part, and I'm going to connect that to the things he said about his past. So Tyrese mentioned growing up in Watts, California. So he described, and we most of us know what it's like out there, but he described it as being really extremely rough, high levels of violence. He lost a lot of friends growing up. He was in a single parent home, so he grew up without a father. A lot of his friends got killed, high levels of poverty. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, when it came to him being famous, for him it wasn't even about the money. He didn't feel safe in that neighborhood, and he wanted to get out by any means necessary. And this was really the drive for him to focus on his talent, work on his talent, put himself in the right place at the right time to be discovered for that Coca-Cola commercial that kind of launched his career. He was doing a lot of work behind the scenes to really get himself in a position to be discovered and to get out, right? And I also mentioned that he grew up without a father as well, and you'll hear, if you listen to the Joe Budden podcast, you'll hear him talking about that too. Now, how does that connect with cheating? Well, we have to look at cheating in the sense of, because there's many different ways to look at cheating. There's many different motivations, right? So a question like why do people cheat isn't really simple enough, but we can explain this one by virtue of a lot of his past can inform us as to why, right? So why would he cheat on every ex that he's that he's had, right? I don't think it was solely about sex. I think when you have an upbringing where a lot of abandonment occurs, right? So, for example, he was abandoned by his father. That's major. And whenever a parent is involved in your abandonment, neglect, rejection, that is automatically going to translate into your relationships one way or another, right? So we have abandonment there. He also mentioned that he had a lot of friends that got killed way too early, right? So kind of growing up, gun violence, losing a lot of friendships. That's another abandonment trauma, right? That probably happened pretty often. And so there could have been many other abandonment traumas in his life, but let's use those two, right? And let's focus on the dad one. So when you maneuver through life having these abandonment scars, a lot of times what the mind does is it tries to premeditatively cause outcomes so it can prove itself right, right? So if Tyrese was dating these different exes, subconsciously in his mind, he likely was saying, before this person leaves me, I'm going to go get with somebody else. So if that person leaves, I won't be alone. I won't be devastated. I won't be abandoned. I'll have something else, right? That's one angle. The other angle is cheating to ruin the relationship, right? If you're scared, if in the back of your mind you're scared somebody is going to leave you or abandon you, you might as well pull the plug now. Why wait? Right? And what's one way, you can ruin the sanctity and the commitment of a relationship. You choose another person to share yourself with, right? And so, as you can see through the trajectory of his relationships, one way that he coped with that fear, that abandonment fear operating in the background, has been to literally ruin all the relationships that he has up to this point, right? And you see this a lot with kids too. If you ever been or noticed or have children who have experienced abandonment, either by one parent, both parents, or in the foster care system, adoption, things like that. A lot of times kids will, especially in a loving environment, right? So, I was talking to an older cousin of mine one time and kind of breaking this down for him because he didn't really understand it. So they take on, him and his wife, since I was a kid. They've been taking in, foster kids, consecutively, getting new kids, and they are, the most loving people you ever meet. And they create a loving environment, very supportive, no abuse, no anything like that. They care for the kids and they do their best for them every chance they get, right? And so this one particular new kid that they had was having all these behaviors, right? A whole lot of rebellion, anger, aggression, was leaving out of, running out of the house, or, just having a lot of disrespectful behaviors, and they couldn't understand why, because they are, they've created this loving environment, right? So like, why are you rebelling against us? And what I told him was, abandonment causes children to try, if they've experienced multiple abandonments prior to, they're going to try to get you to abandon them so they can feel like they're right. Their thought process about them and their self-worth can be correct. That's what fear does at its maximum. It'll say, okay, you've been abandoned, so they're going to do it too. But if you have a loving environment, they're not going to just kick you out. They're going to try to help you, support you, try to figure out what's going on. So it's harder for a kid to push away a loving family with just normal behavior. So they have to ramp up the disrespect. They have to, in order to push that type of parent, or those types of adoptive parents away, they're going to have a whole lot of behaviors, right? And so I was telling them, it's almost a good sign that the behaviors reach this level, because it shows that, you know, they're they have they do want to feel safe, and they do respect you, but they don't trust love itself. And that's really the key that I'm trying to get through tonight, is that a lot of times the source of toxic dating cycles is not trusting love and not realizing it. And that's really a major, that's such a major key, right? To realize is that if if in the background you don't trust love and you expect abandonment, 9 times out of 10 you're going to run into someone or be attracted to someone who will eventually abandon you, because they'll have all the signs, but you won't see them, because the familiarity and the need for compassion will seduce you out of having that radar. You won't be able to detect it in enough time. And so you'll end up where you started, right? Right back at square one. And then now you have all this evidence built up that you're you're bound to be abandoned, and the cycle starts all over again. It's very difficult to change the mindset when you have all of this physical evidence. And a lot of times it can get and this is what I don't like, but when it gets gender and racially specific, right? So you'll hear things like, I don't want to date, black women always do this, or black men always do this. And then you'll try to, have a discussion, and they'll point to the evidence in their personal life, which is, the events are valid events that happen. But my question is always, well, what have you changed about you, right? What healing uh are you on a healing journey? What have you switched? Because if the same results keep coming, it's not a question of, well, I'm going to date this entire race is done because I dated 5 people. Now I got to sweep this race off the map, and then I got to go over here and date this, as if it's a racial component. And the rude awakening for people with that mindset is that as soon as you get over there, you go find the same thing you had over here, because it's not them. It's you feeling, you resonating with a concept that they all have. right? It's similar to like when you get a new car and now you notice that car everywhere. Everywhere you could feel like that car is on every road you on, every highway, it's parked next to you. Like, damn, it's that many of these? Is that many of these out here? It's not that. Your mind has now shifted uh your mind has now shifted itself to focus and notice that. So you think that can't that's it's the reticular activating system that causes that phenomenon. So if that can happen, you don't think attraction can work the same way, where you are in an attraction loop with people who hold certain traits that make it more likely for them to do the thing to you that you don't want them to do, or to do the thing to you that you have been afraid of happening again since you were 7 or 6, or whatever childhood environment you grew up in where you experienced that abandonment and rejection. It's a very predictable thing, right? And so before we keep going, definitely, I want to take you guys' attention to, before I forget, the jumbotron. I'm doing a webinar, how to release trauma in 90 days. I think this is very very much important, very much critical, and very much in line with what we're talking about now. So definitely make sure you click on that to join. It's a free event. It's going down next Tuesday. Make sure you register ASAP. And you can do it while you're listening in here. And definitely be sure to tell a friend as well. Feel free to share the link. So, in line with that, this is something that it brings me a lot of joy to talk about because it needs to be demystified. It's not as cut and dry. Healing from childhood trauma and the effects that it has on relationships, it's not as simple as the step-by-step directions that you would get on, healing a cut, a gash, or something that you can watch physically heal itself. Because when you get cuts physically, you can watch the stages of progression in healing. When people say time heals wounds, I think they're more so talking about most physical wounds, because we're trained by, just living in the human experience to know when we cut ourselves, the healing process starts automatically because that's how we're designed. When we have childhood trauma, that does not heal itself automatically by virtue of time. It doesn't heal the same way. The problem is we equate the two a lot of times. We think that, okay, well, if jumping into a relationship right after the other one is not good, then I'll just wait a pre-designated time frame and heal that way. And the problem with that is the childhood trauma doesn't heal itself. What the time will do is allow you to create a new level of familiarity with being without the person, right? So you won't be as addicted to that routine of being in a relationship and being in love, what that looks like. It'll allow you to fall out of the couple's routine and back into a single person. It'll also give you more time and space to be able to find strategies and a healing protocol to actively heal, right? Which is the benefit, because what I do is provide strategies, plans, a very customized approach with daily strategies and habits to help you reprogram your way out of the trauma mindset, right? And how it's carried a level of control over your life and all of your outcomes, right? So we're talking about relationship health now, dating and relationships, but it affects your mental health. It affects your relationship with your purpose and passion and pursuit. It affects your physical health. It affects your consistency with self-care. It affects, family relationships, right? And it keeps you uh, bound and shackled to a certain fear-based mentality that will always leave you in a similar state, right? So, there's certain people who may be overwhelmed constantly, where you ask, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm 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 surviving. It's another day, or let me tell you about this bullshit that happened. So that, but every day is like that, right? Where you know you become or you have been deprioritized for a large chunk of your life. Many people walk around not being the priority in their own life. So if you look at the history, you'll see that as a child, they had to take care of siblings. So they're responsible for the siblings. Or mom was always sick. So they was taking care of mom growing up, right? Doing extra work and being parentified, and then got to take care of the siblings, and then got to take care of family, and then you working, and then you get a relationship. You got to take care of your partner, right? And you make sure they good. Make sure now it's partner, then it's family, then it's work. Make sure work is you got to stay on top of everything over there. So you got to do that, right? And then let's say you have a kid. Now you got a child involved, so you got to take care of the kid, right? What you gonna you can't not do that. So then now you essentially have built and surrounded yourself with a circle or a system that ensures that you are in last place. And I like the term that Dr. Claude Anderson uses. I can use it in this context: being a permanent underclass. So it's almost like you create you build your life around being a non-priority. And then you say, well, where does that come from? Take it back to the childhood environment, right? If you were not paid attention to, if you were not focused on, if you were not prioritized, if you were given responsibilities and not poured into, right? If the only time you got attention was when somebody was asking you for something or asking you to do something, you would adapt your self-esteem to think that love comes from doing. I receive love when I do things for people. So it becomes a merit. You live in a merit-based type of world, and the problem with that is more times than not, you don't get the love that you're seeking, but you're overworking yourself in pursuit of it. So you don't get the reciprocation that you think you've earned based on the actions, which number one, it makes you overwork. Number two, it makes you feel bad from a self-esteem standpoint, because if I'm only good when I'm doing, but I'm not getting love back for doing it, what am I really? Like, am I like expendable? You got to think of these thoughts. These are some of the thoughts that may run through your head. Like, what exactly is the worth when I'm going through certain things and nobody's around to support? Nobody's randomly, you may be the person who randomly checks in on people, but nobody does the same thing back. And so it essentially creates the same environment as an adult that you may have come up in, on your way up, growing up. And that's really a tough thing, because as an adult, the small kickbacks of self-esteem that occur when you're the rescuer or the over sacrificer is not enough to sustain you. It's only enough to keep you doing it every day of the week. And it also creates this need to constantly be busy and productive too, right? Because again, if love comes from merit, I have to be doing in order to be revered, or in order to gain attention, or to gain favor. I have to be doing. So the discomfort comes in when you stop doing. If I chill, if I do self-care, if I say no to a request, that's when the alarms go off. And that's emotional reasoning. That's the fear saying, whoa, you changing the program. Stop changing the program. Right? It's scary over there. Don't do that. They're gonna hate you. You're gonna lose your job. Your family's gonna disown you. They're gonna talk about you on social media. Right? You're gonna lose your spouse, your partner. The guilt factor comes in. That guilt button is big, right? And the problem the problem is when you get into romantic relationships, it's one of the more obvious, I don't want to say flaws, because it's part of the human experience, but it's one of the more obvious things that manipulators find in you. So it almost makes you a target. You coming in as the rescuer, them coming in as the manipulator and the exploiter. They see a big guilt button on your forehead. At some point in the dating, courting, talking process, they are scanning you for flaws and ways to keep you under control. And when they see that guilt button, they say, that's it. That's it. And they will press it to death. And the issue will be that it will keep working, because that wound has never been sealed up. So if you were walking with a big gash on your forehead, they could put any and everything in there to keep it from healing up, right? And so when they come in and do this, they chip away at the self-esteem again. You feel abandonment even within the relationship. So you don't even have to break up. You can be in a relationship and feel active abandonment, or the threat of abandonment, because a lot of times that's what the narcissist will do. They'll threaten.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
To leave. And so you might feel yourself in that type of position where they're putting that in the mix. And so that it show on the other end, it shows, because it feels bad and because those threats work, shows the healing that needs to be done. Because at your most healed version, you won't those types of threats. If that same person, if you teleported to the future and was still dating that person, the second they threaten you with leaving, you would say, well, I was going to tell you to leave anyway. Go ahead. This you doing me a favor. What you talking about? Right? And so that's the level that I want to empower all of you to be in, if that's the state, the state that you're, maybe working through. Those are some of the things that you want to work through, and to be able to create change around, because your exes show you your wounds. Your exes show you where the work needs to be done. They're not there to show you that they're messed up so you can then talk about how bad they are and not learn anything or change anything before the next one. They're not a conversation piece or an accountability shift. They're supposed to be your semester. They're supposed to be education and knowledge on how to maneuver and what needs to be worked on. You know, it's like a report card. Like, okay, I see I got a C in language arts. I'm gonna need to work on that. Like that's literally all it has to be. Because one thing I don't, you know, want is a, you know, there's lack of accountability where you're hiding from your power of choice. But then there's too much accountability. Then there's times, you know, I don't want you in a space where you feel like you're responsible for all of it, or you're responsible for every aspect, or you're somebody who is incapable of choosing properly, right? I don't, you know, I want you to have some self-compassion and to know that yes, you made certain decisions within the context of certain things that were happening in your life. You wanted something, you chose wrong. Now, in order to make that time period worth it, you have to get on a self-healing journey and be actively healing the areas that X brought up for you. What was that X meant to show you? And what are you doing about it? Because I get that it's scary to face yourself and your past at different times, but if you just keep, you know, if you put the blindfolds on and keep going forward in a situation like this, the stakes will elevate, and every relationship you get in will have a worse ending. It will gradually increase in intensity. I promise you that, and I've seen it too many times, you know. And relationship choice is a life or death situation, in my opinion. Like it's not something that you know we can afford to take lightly. It's not something that we can take our relationship history and then kind of just discard it, or use it as a means to have conversations about how, you know, to have group communication or group, you know, time telling about talking about how bad our exes were, etc. Like, you know, you may have to do that to vent a few times, but that shouldn't be the basis of your existence, because you'll never leave that cycle if you're unwilling to do the things that are necessary, you know, and to really build yourself back up, because the happiness you're looking for, the partner you're looking for, the life you're looking for depends on your choices daily, right? Your choices daily, and how much of a priority you are. Because here's the other pitfall, right? If you are in rescuer mode and you're always doing for everybody else, job, you know, family, uh, everybody else around you, and you're not the priority, then you place yourself in a more vulnerable state for the wrong person, because you build a desperate nature. Now you're so overworked, you're tired, you're emotionally beaten, right, by life and all of these tasks and obligations, and the loneliness attaching itself to that. Now, when you get out there trying to, not even trying to date, you might just be walking around just trying to gather your bearings or something. The type of people that you either will attract to you or that you'll be attracted to are gonna are going to continue the space you're in. Prime example: if you deprioritize yourself, you're going to connect with somebody who will help you with the job. I'm going to say that again. If you create a pattern of deprioritizing yourself, you are going to attract somebody who's going to be a co-creator in keeping you not a priority, and pressing you to the bottom of the list. You're going to be in relationships feeling like you don't matter for shit, but you're in a so-called relationship, but you'll be the last to be considered, right? How does that work? Why how is it helpful? Why would a relationship even be an option if You're going to be just as lonely and deprioritized as you would be solo, right? You'd be better off solo in a situation like that. Prime reason is you got one less person to care about and have to cater to, and you have one less uh, person who is going to psychologically traumatize you on a daily basis. We could all do without that. And if I'm being honest again, the one of the major advantages to being single is you can build your healing journey uninterrupted, because it's just my opinion. Now, when it comes to the order of dating versus, the healing process, you should start your process before dating somebody. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I think, the reason I view it that way is the healing is going to help you to release the trauma and cultivate a habit of protecting your energy and cultivating and generating the peace that you have looked for in other people erroneously. So if you're able to create and generate your own peace by changing your habits, by prioritizing self, by utilizing healing resources and building yourself, right? As you're able to do, as you start to do that, your criteria changes. You become different. You start to look at some of these exes and say, how the hell did I get connected to that? And you start to create distance, and the distance between who you are and who you were looks crazy. It'd be 100 miles between you and that ex, and you like, well, damn, I can't even see myself picking this person, right? And you start to continue to go up and up and up, and as you're doing so, listen, as you're doing so, you start to create and generate that peace and happiness yourself, and it don't even make sense. You're literally, as you watch yourself as this NASA space shuttle dropping off equipment, pieces, tanks, everything that cannot survive the ascension, everything that cannot survive the upward journey falls off one way or another. You're gonna have people that you were rescuing and giving to, and then you start to focus on self, and they hate on that. They try to shame you out of it. They press the guilt button broke. They ain't even realize the button broke. Now you don't do that no more. They start to ghost you. They start to talk bad about you, whatever the case is, right? You leave them all behind. Everything around you starts to shift because you're making this move. You're ascending and elevating, right? So that's changing who you are. That's generating different energy, and it's also generating energy that resonates with people who are creating their own peace and happiness as well, right? So in essence, you are solving the problem of attracting the same types that are familiar to your childhood trauma or childhood environment by virtue of just entering and create and being involved in a consistent healing journey yourself, right? So as you continue to heal, as you continue to grow, who you resonate with changes. And trust and believe, because I've helped a lot of people work through this. When things happen, and you will see major shifts in your life. People coming out of their face when you start to heal and have boundaries and start to do things for you. The switch up is crazy. You will see a lot of people activate and deactivate. You'll have people who just ghost on you, won't even explain nothing. You'll have people who now you'll find out have always had a secret desire for your downfall. You'll find out that people may have been jealous of you this whole time, intimidated by you this whole time, trying to hold you down this whole time. You'll notice that there are people who were always seemingly around for your bad times, not to help you feel better, but to revel in your sadness, right? Would you believe that there are some people that may be in your life who are always trying to be there when you're going through something so that they can feel better about their life because they're jealous of who you are and who you have become? That they just want to see you when you're sad. The quickest way to expose them and put the flashlight on those type of roaches, right, is notice how they act when you're in a positive light, when you have victories to share, when you have amazing things happening, when you are speaking on health, growth, evolution, right? And you begin to see how they either respond or don't respond, or how they monopolize the conversation. They'll blow the wind right out of your victory by changing the subject and switching it over to something either negative or something they got going on. I promise you, there are some some salamanders, snakes, and lizards lurking in your circle, and the only way to fully expose them is to choose you and continue to do so. You know why? Because somebody who is whole within themselves, somebody who is confident in themselves, someone who can stand alone on their passions, purpose, who has that self-worth already set and is on a healing, self-healing and evolutionary journey, right? Every time you talk about victories, they're going to be right there with you. Every time you talk about having some self-care, they're going to be right there with you. Every time you talk about, nah, I can't come to that event, I ain't feeling so high, I need some me time, they're going to congratulate you for even saying that and say, catch you next time. It's all good. Focus on you. I'll check on you when it's over. Right? That's what real friendship looks like. Or that's what it should look like. Real friends should be there for both times. You should be able to celebrate, cry together, and get fly together. Everything should be going back and forth together, and being on a self-healing journey, which is comprised of self-care and self-prioritization, right? That should be applauded and congratulated. So you'll know, some of y'all might be some of y'all might be thinking right now with of certain people that this sounds like, because this exists. And you know people too who do what I call balancing the room, where if you, for whatever reason, you might see this at work a lot too, where somebody, you intimidate, let's say you don't know, you're not trying to intimidate nobody, you're not trying to stun on nobody, but you never know who's intimidated by you. You never know who is jealous of you. You never know who wants your energy, your attention, your accolades. You never know that. People don't always come out and say that, but what they will do is balance the room. What I mean is, if you walk in a room and now the energy is on you. So the only way they can balance it is either to be you, or to learn from you and grow and maintain their own energy, whatever that looks like, or they have to bring you down a couple notches, right? There's only two directions. So they only they can either pull you aside and say, hey, you know what I'm saying, what you working out, you juicing, what's your regimen, help me out. I like what you doing, I respect what you doing, throw me some tips. You on one today, I like it. That's one way of that's rare to find, but that's one way of going about balancing the room. Hey, I see some sunshine, let me get next to it. Or, and this is the most common way to balance the room, people come in and they have to bring your level down some notches. This can be some sneaky background stuff at work, snitching on you at work, fumbling or sabotaging your promotion, making up lies in the break room. You see what I'm saying? And you know, or saying something in front of everybody else that you didn't want out there, or change, aggressively changing the subject, starting the meeting while you talking. Anything, any and all of the above will be a problem because you unknowingly are a problem for them. Y'all need to understand what y'all represent out here. You represent something. Everybody's not equipped to give those flowers in the face of being intimidated in that way. Everybody's not built like that. So they go the sneaky way. And that's cool. And that's cool. And that works too. Because who you were destined to be is uninterruptible. The journey that you're on to heal and grow, and the willingness that you have to be accountable for your choices is a fearless act. You got to understand, you might be somebody right now who is dealing with a lot of fears, a lot of anxieties and everything like that. But to have the self-awareness to know where you went wrong, to have the personal accountability to know, hey, I made some mistakes based on my childhood environment, my emotional states, and all of these different factors and these events that have happened. That's the first step to the next level. I do these spaces for y'all, the people who could say, and have the people that can have the awareness to say, all right, some things have happened in my life that I didn't cause, but there are some things that I have voluntarily chosen. I don't want to choose them no more because I don't like the results. I want to grow. I want to be better. I want to ascend. I want to be my best version. That's who I do it for. I can't change somebody who don't have any accountability. I'm not in it to change or create converts. I'm here to demystify trauma healing and clear the path for you so that you can be as consistent as you would like to be and as you're capable of at your own pace, to become better and better, to learn more about you. Sometimes some of us are so busy, we haven't had time to sit down and really conceptualize who the hell we are. We've just been swept through these events of life and always in output mode. And then when you reflect back, it's a cascade. It's too much to think about, right? And then you're trying to also pursue this next level of who you would like to be and who you want to grow into. And that's there. It doesn't matter what age. That's what's there for you, and that's what's exciting about it, because that's a day. That's a right now starting point thing. This isn't something you gotta wait for. So definitely be sure, click the link while it's there. Make sure y'all register immediately for the webinar coming up, the workshop coming up. I'm doing it next week. It's free. I want y'all to be present because I'll be able to go deeper and to be able to provide some solutions. Because one thing I don't like, a lot of times you'll see online, people say, "Oh, you had trauma, well, you need healing, or you need to go, talk to somebody or whatever," and it's kind of a dismissive thing. But you need to heal, you need healing, right? These different things, these are just words. One thing that I prided myself on, especially going through what I went through, right, which I'll talk about in the webinar, because y'all need to know. I want y'all to know my story as well, so you can help. If anybody has been through something similar, y'all can navigate through. Because when you're talking grief and loss, man. So but my biggest the biggest thing and the imprint I want to leave is to be able to make healing simple, practical, clear cut, exactly what you can be doing on a daily basis. Because again, a lot of you are busy, got a lot going on, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve to heal. That doesn't mean that you can't grow and be able to change, because the healing changes your environment, right? The healing helps you to break the cycle and break out of the structure and the system you've built around you to keep you the least priority, right? So the goal, my goal has always been to take healing trauma and make it as simple and practical as possible, so that it weaves its its way into your everyday, right? And it's convenient, but it's powerful, and you can begin to see results. You can begin to see your mood elevate. You can begin to realize that you are powerful enough to make changes in an area that you didn't cause, right? You know how powerful that is. If you have undergone any childhood trauma, it's let's just look at it. Between, let's say the age between 0 and 7, let's start there. That's when you're the most suggestible. That's the brainwave state similar to hypnosis. That's when the most, that's your most imaginative. That's when the programming occurs, right? So if you have something happen during that stage of development that has stuck with you over decades of time and heavily influenced your behaviors on all major levels, that can be an intimidating task to try to handle that. And you may think, I can't make no changes with all of that. Something as complex as trauma and how it weaves its way into mental health, relationship health, physical health, right? All of these different habits, thoughts, emotions that it has seemingly has control over. But I'm here to tell you different, and I'm here to tell you that you are powerful enough if you know exactly what to do. If you know exactly what to do, and you have the support, the consistent support, because again, I'm a big believer in consistency and consistent support. We especially need all the support we can get, and so it's important for me to be able to support you all as well on this journey on a very consistent level. So I have what I'll be talking about in the webinar is uh, something that I have weekly, something that will be available 24/7, something that is available monthly, like resources to keep the healing consistent no matter where you are in your journey, right? That's really the vision. And so I'm gonna break down what I have for you guys during that webinar. So make sure you click on the top. It's a free event. We're gonna get right to it and begin to heal ourselves, because especially as Black people, we need to understand that our first of all, healing our trauma is overdue, number one. Number two, when we look at healing, there's two major levels to it. There's the micro, which is our individual household, right? So whatever childhood trauma you've encountered, that's in the micro level. That's mom, dad, the people, your family, your friends, your particular existence, right? Neighborhood, right? So that's on the micro level, and you can have a lot of trauma just from that, right? Abandonment trauma, abuse, neglect, all of these different things can happen. Tragic loss, all of that, racial trauma. So, and then on the macro, the big level, as a people, we got trauma. So there's two levels we need to heal from when we have, and I don't have to tell you racial trauma. I don't have to tell you what that looks like, right? But as you know, it's every facet of life. Every area of life is infected with trauma on a global level. So if we have double two layers of trauma to deal with, we need double the help. We need double the support. We can't compare our needs to other groups. This is something totally different. And that's something that I'm passionate about as well, is being able to make these things very simple, but also to be able to empower you to deal with everything on every level. So dealing with your past childhood trauma, dealing with whatever trauma that's come from your relationships, that has come from your just life in general, your particular timeline, your traumatic points along your timeline, but also on that bigger level as well, and how to combat that, because I'm looking at some of the people here, major work being done as far as empowerment of our people, major work being done. And how can we ask those who are working so much for us to just continue to do so without being supported on the battlefront that counts, which is mental and emotional health, without having and being empowered on that level, because that's what it takes to succeed. If you for any of us to make any sort of change, we can't be anchored by things that have happened in our past, and not even just for the group and our people's progression, but just for you, right? Just the right to exist and the right to be in a position to be able to be supported and to heal, because like I mentioned before, a lot of us are used to non-reciprocal situations, non-reciprocal relationships, pouring a lot out and not getting anything back, right? On a relationship level, maybe family level, friendship level, and then as a people as a whole. How many times, I mean, if we're talking reparations, right? What is reparations for? It's for a non-reciprocal exploitive time in history that has lasted hundreds of years straight. So on some level, we've been conditioned to expect to be in non-reciprocal relationships. Somebody wins from our resources, our energy, our support, our effort. Somebody else has to win, and we just play the background and live deprioritized, live at the bottom of the list. And I don't like non-reciprocation. I don't play like that, right? And I don't like that for you all as well, because I know, you know, many of you probably have experienced it on one level or another. And now is the time to be in a position to create your desired self, right? To build your next version, to get the the unyielding and consistent support to be able to become who you would like to become, so that you can do whatever you were called to do and to be activated within your purpose. That's something that I love, is to help people to unlock everything, to be able to fully express themselves within their purpose, because we all have a role. Speaking before, when I was talking about, you might be in a job and people try to balance the room. They feel intimidated by you, so then they have to bring you down somehow for them to feel better, right? So in that type of sense, we have to look at that that type of energy, or that those types of shifts, empowering yourself to be your best version, and to be, to take yourself to these different heights, leaves behind a lot of that energy, and it puts you in a whole different stratosphere, and it also puts you in a space to demand reciprocation, because when you change your vibration, you demand similar. You'll start to be in a position where you demand similar to where you're vibrating, especially if you build consistency around it, right? Because what I want for you guys is peace as a default. For many of us, unfortunately, anxiety is a default. Depression is a default. Negative expectations, overthinking is the default setting. Whenever something happens, that's the next step, and then the next goal is to climb out of that. Whereas when you build peace as a default setting, you may have some triggers, some reactions, but they'll be minimal, and you will rise back into a state of peace, right? Because you have to build mental consistency in order to find that space, and it'll be your default. So it'll be the equivalent of reaching a cruising altitude, right? So then you have certain turbulence, and then you stabilize the plane and go back to autopilot, right? And things that used to trigger you into days or weeks within that former default setting won't be able to take you there, because what you'll learn in the webinar as well is that you will have basically maintained a state where those levels of fear are obsolete. You have to train your mind to make fear not as active, right? And that's where anxiety and different things come from when it comes to trauma. It's all fear based, and it's all major alarms going off and fear signals being sent. And that's a lot of times why you end up in certain relationships. It's why you end up in certain types of relationships, because the fear aspect. How long will I be alone if I don't go with this person? Will I find somebody in this state that I'm in? This person likes me, so will I be able to find somebody if I turn this down, right? Is this my only chance at something, right? It's crazy out there, the dating pool, the da 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 da, right? And a lot of these things kind of can put us in spaces that are not good for us, or that continue our our harm, and that can worsen our condition. So what I will say is I appreciate everybody for coming through. And if anybody, definitely shoot me a request. I'll put a little, I'll extend it for a little bit. Does anybody have any feedback, any relationships, or any experiences that go sort of with the concept of or the context that we talked about today? Maybe thinking that you were in love, actually being in trauma, or in a trauma bonding situation. Feel free to request, because that actually that term has been thrown around a lot of times. But I will go as far as to say, I think, and this might sound controversial, but I think that all relationships are trauma bonds, right? but it's how much trauma is active, or is trauma dominant, or is it recessive? Because we've all, this era of time, probably any era of time, if you really just look at history, like I can't even see a time frame where there was if you look at historical events, like when was there not just traumatized, just terror, just, you know what I'm saying, just trauma all over the, all over the planet. You would have to go to ancient Africa to really avoid that. But what I'm saying is, especially in the United States, I think that there's there's always a level of past trauma to connect to, but trauma should not be dominant when you're choosing relationships. So if you haven't subdued it, if you haven't found a way to, if you check my handle, above trauma, right? That's my brand. If you haven't found a way to live above it, and it's active and dominant, then you will choose and connect with partners who have that active and dominant trauma within them, and two people who are trauma dominant will, it's going to be havoc, and it's going to be, the end will be very much predictable. And so if trauma is minimized, and it's contained, it's in the background, it's basically there for your knowledge, and you're using it as a growth point, you're using it as a launch point, you're using it for, information, educational purposes, as far as your personal growth. You're drawing the advantages from it. It's not that it no longer exists, it's that it no longer controls you, right? And that's really the point I wanted to make. So, definitely, guys, come back next Tuesday. Again, this is every Tuesday, Above Trauma Tuesdays, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. I appreciate y'all coming through and enjoying the space with me. Be sure to also click the link for the webinars on my feed as well. And, connect with me. If you have any questions, concerns, if you're going through anything and you kind of need some, ideas or heads up or any kind of feedback, definitely, connect with me. All right, y'all have a great night.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.